In this video, we explore a chilling story of how human conflict, not a storm or equipment failure, brought tragedy to a sailing crew during their circumnavigation of the globe. It's a powerful reminder that the greatest danger at sea isn't always the weather. Sometimes it's the people on board. As we trace the final days of this voyage through the unforgiving Indian Ocean, you'll see how rising tensions, poor communication, and unresolved disputes led to a devastating outcome. This isn't just a story. It's a lesson in leadership, emotional resilience, and what can go wrong when unity breaks down offshore. We'll dive into the red flags that were ignored, the turning points that sealed their fate, and what every sailor can learn from this harrowing incident. Whether you sail solo or with a crew, the insights in this video might one day save your life or someone else's. So, stay with us. What happened out there could happen to anyone, and understanding it might be the most important step you take before your next voyage. The Odyssey cut through the indigo waves of the Indian Ocean, its sails taut against the wind, a 45-foot sloop that had carried its crew halfway around the Eos globe. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the electric hum of an approaching storm. It was May, the cusp of cyclone season, and the ocean churned with a restless energy that mirrored the growing tension aboard. The crew of 5 had been at sea for weeks, their circumnavigation a grueling test of endurance, skill, and unity. But now, as they sailed 800 miles west of the Maldives, a rift was forming, one that threatened to tear them apart. Captain Jonathan Marlowe stood at the helm, his weathered hands gripping the wheel. At 50, John was a sailor of the old school, with a face carved by decades of sun and wind, his gray eyes sharp as they scanned the horizon. He'd sailed the Indian Ocean twice before, knew its moods, its tricks. He trusted his instincts over charts, his gut over gadgets. To him, the sea was a living thing, and he spoke to it in quiet moments, as if it might whisper back. Beside him, Alexander Petrov, the navigator, hunched over a tablet, his fingers dancing across the screen. At 30, Alex was the youngest aboard, a wiry Russian with a quick mind and a restless energy. He'd joined the Odyssey in Phuket, bringing with him a laptop loaded with weather models, satellite data, and routing software. His confidence bordered on arrogance, but his predictions had been uncannily accurate. Until now. The rest of the crew sensed the brewing conflict. Sarah Nguyen, the first mate, was a steady presence, her calm demeanor a counterpoint to the men's escalating tempers. At 38, she'd sailed with John for years, her loyalty unwavering, though she wasn't blind to his stubbornness. Miguel Torres, the deckhand, was a cheerful Spaniard whose jokes usually kept spirits high, but even he'd grown quiet. And then there was Lena Voss, the cook and medic, a soft-spoken German who watched the drama unfold with growing unease. The trouble had started 2 days ago when Alex's weather models flagged a disturbance forming in the Bay of Bengal. Cyclone Zara, as it was now named, was gathering strength, its path uncertain but ominous. John had studied the sky, the way the clouds piled high and dark, the way the wind carried a metallic tang. "We go south," he declared. "Keep clear of the cyclone's reach. It's the safe play." Alex had disagreed, his voice sharp. "South takes us into stronger trade winds and upwelling currents. The data says Zara's moving east. We go north, skirt the edge, and save 3 days." He'd tapped his tablet, pulling up a grid file that showed wind vectors and pressure gradients. To him, the ocean was a puzzle, solvable with algorithms and real-time data. John's jaw had tightened. "I've seen storms like this shift without warning. South is safer." End of discussion. But it wasn't the end. Alex had muttered under his breath, his frustration spilling into late-night debates with Sarah and Miguel. "He's stuck in the 80s, Alex had said, his accent thick with irritation, ignoring data for gut feelings. It's reckless. Sarah had tried to mediate, but John's refusal to budge only fueled Alex's resentment. The crew was splitting, loyalty fraying like an overworked halyard. Now, as the Odyssey sailed under a sky bruised with clouds, the tension was palpable. The barometer was dropping 29.8 inches and falling fast. Waves slapped the hull, sending spray over the deck. John stood resolute, his eyes fixed on the horizon, while Alex sat in the cockpit, his tablet glowing in the dim light. The wind was picking up, a steady 25 knots from the northeast, with gusts that made the rigging hum. "John," Alex said, his voice cutting through the wind, "the latest update shows Zara tracking east-northeast. If we hold this course, we're sailing into the outer bands. We need to bear north now." John didn't turn. "You're reading a screen, not the sea. Those clouds," he pointed to a towering cumulonimbus on the horizon, "they're telling me to stay south. You don't outrun a cyclone by cutting across its path." Alex stood, his fists clenched. "This isn't 1985. We have satellite data, wind models. Your clouds are just water vapor. The numbers don't lie." John's eyes flashed. "Numbers didn't save the Albatross in '92. Experience did." "Sit down, Alex." The mention of the Albatross, a yacht lost in a cyclone John had narrowly escaped, was a low blow. Alex's face reddened. "You're risking our lives to prove a point. I'm the navigator. This is my call." "Your call?" John's voice was low, dangerous. "I'm the captain. You follow orders or you're off this boat." Sarah stepped between them, her voice firm. "Enough. We're a team. Let's look at the data together, figure this out." But the moment for reason had passed. The wind was rising, the sea growing heavier. A wave broke over the bow, drenching Miguel as he secured a loose line. Lena emerged from the galley, her face pale. The radio's picking up warnings. Zara's intensifying. Category 2, possible Category 3 by tomorrow. John nodded, his expression grim. "Reef the mainsail, Sarah. We're holding course." Alex threw up his hands. "This is insanity. You're steering us into a wall of wind." He shoved his tablet at John, the screen showing a swirling mass of red and yellow. "Look at it." "North is clear." John pushed the tablet away harder than he meant to. It clattered to the deck, the screen cracking. Alex froze, then lunged forward, grabbing John's jacket. "You're going to kill us all," Sarah shouted. "Alex, stop!" But it was too late. John shoved Alex back, his strength surprising for a man his age. Alex stumbled, caught himself on the lifeline, and came at John again, his fist swinging. The punch grazed John's jaw, and the captain roared, tackling Alex to the deck. The boat lurched as a wave hit, throwing them against the cockpit coaming. Miguel rushed to pull them apart, but the fight was a blur of fists and curses. Lena screamed, "Stop it!" As the Odyssey heeled sharply, the wind now a howling 35 knots. In the chaos, Alex broke free, staggering toward the rail. John, caught in the heat of the moment, shoved him, a reflex born of rage. Alex's eyes widened as he lost his footing, his hands grasping at air. A wave surged over the deck, and with a sickening lurch, Alex went over the side. "Man overboard!" Sarah's voice cut through the storm, sharp and commanding. The crew froze, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. John stood, his face ashen, the fight drained from him. "Jesus," he whispered. Sarah was already moving, her training kicking in. "Miguel, spotlight. Lena, grab the horseshoe." "Boy!" She scrambled to the helm, spinning the wheel to bring the Odyssey about. "Quick stop. Now, John, mark the position." John snapped out of his daze, his hands trembling as he punched the GPS coordinates into the chart plotter. 4 degrees, 65 degree. The boat was 800 miles from land, the nearest help a faint hope. Alex was out there, in a sea that was turning monstrous. Sarah executed the quick-stop maneuver, a technique drilled into every sailor for this exact nightmare. She tacked the Odyssey hard, bringing the bow through the wind, then eased the sails to slow the boat. The goal was to circle back to Alex's position, keeping him in sight. But the storm was closing in, the waves now 10 feet and growing, the wind a relentless scream. Miguel leaned over the rail, his spotlight cutting through the spray. "There!" he shouted, pointing to a flash of orange, Alex's life jacket, bobbing in the trough of a wave. Lena hurled the horseshoe buoy, its strobe light blinking as it hit the water. The buoy landed close, but Alex was struggling, his arms flailing as the sea tossed him. "Keep him in sight," Sarah yelled, her voice hoarse. She adjusted the helm, trying to position the Odyssey for a beam reach, the safest angle to approach a man overboard. But the wind was gusting to 40 knots, and the boat was fighting her, the rudder straining against the waves. John stood at the rail, his eyes locked on Alex. The man he'd fought, the man he'd pushed, was now a speck in the vast angry ocean. Guilt clawed at him, but there was no time for it. "We need the rescue sling," he barked. "Miguel, rig it now." Miguel nodded, scrambling to the stern where the rescue equipment was stowed. He clipped the sling to a halyard, ready to hoist Alex aboard, if they could get close enough. Lena was on the radio, her voice steady despite her fear. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Odyssey. Man overboard, position 4 degrees south, 65 degrees east. Request immediate assistance." The response was static, then a faint voice, barely audible over the storm. A cargo ship 200 miles away acknowledged the call, but warned they couldn't reach them for hours. The Odyssey was alone. Sarah brought the boat closer, her hands white-knuckled on the wheel. The waves were relentless, each one threatening to push them off course. Alex was still visible, clinging to the buoy, but he was tiring, his movements sluggish. The water was 26 degrees, warm enough to delay hypothermia, but the seas were battering. Him and sharks were a real threat in these waters. "John, we've got one shot at this," Sarah said, her eyes fierce. "Get ready to pull him in." John nodded, his jaw set. He moved to the rail, the rescue sling in hand. The Odyssey was now 20 yards from Alex, the closest they'd gotten. Miguel aimed the spotlight, keeping Alex illuminated. Lena stood ready, with blankets and a medical kit, her face a mask of determination. But the storm had other plans. A rogue wave, 15 feet high, slammed into the Odyssey, heeling the boat hard to starboard. The crew grabbed lifelines, holding on as water poured over the deck. When the boat righted, Miguel's spotlight swept the sea and Alex was gone. "No!" John roared, his voice lost in the wind. He leaned over the rail, scanning the waves, but there was nothing, only the buoy's strobe blinking mockingly in the distance. Sarah held the helm, her face grim, fighting to keep the boat steady. "Keep looking," Lena cried, her voice breaking. Miguel swept the spotlight in wide arcs, but the sea was a chaos of foam and shadow. Minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Alex was out there somewhere, but the odds were slipping away. John sank to his knees, his hands gripping the rail. The fight, the shove, the moment of rage, it replayed in his mind, a loop of regret. Sarah put a hand on his shoulder, her voice low. "We're not giving up, John. We keep searching." But as the storm closed in, the Odyssey battered by wind and waves, the crew knew the truth. The sea was unforgiving, and their mistake, John's mistake, might have cost Alex his life. The Odyssey groaned under the relentless assault of the Indian Ocean, its hull battered by waves that rose like dark mountains. The storm had fully enveloped them now, Cyclone Zara's outer bands unleashing winds that screamed at 45 knots, gusting higher. Rain lashed the deck in sheets, blurring the line between sea and sky. The crew, drenched and exhausted, clung to their stations, their faces etched with desperation. Alexander Petrov was still out there, lost in the churning abyss, and every second that passed dimmed the hope of finding him. Captain Jonathan Marlowe stood at the rail, his eyes burning from salt and strain. The image of Alex's fall haunted him, the shove, the moment of unchecked rage that had sent the navigator over the side. His hand, still gripping the lifeline, trembled with guilt. He'd been a captain for 20 years, prided himself on keeping his crew safe. Now he'd failed them, failed Alex, and the weight of it threatened to crush him. Sarah Nguyen, at the helm, fought to keep the Odyssey on a search pattern. Her arms ached from wrestling the wheel, but her focus was unbreakable. She'd switched to a sector search, a technique she'd learned in training, sweeping the area in expanding arcs from Alex's last known position, 4 degrees, 65-degree re. The GPS chart plotter glowed in the cockpit. It screened a lifeline to their dwindling chances. "We're covering a half-mile radius," she called, her voice hoarse over the wind. "Miguel, anything?" Miguel Torres, perched at the bow, swept the spotlight across the waves. His hands were numb, the beam shaking as he scanned the sea. "Nothing yet," he shouted back, his usual cheer replaced by grim determination. The spotlight's range was limited in the storm, the waves swallowing its light. He tied himself to the mast to avoid being swept overboard, his harness taut as the Odyssey pitched. Lena Voss knelt in the cockpit, her hands clasped around the radio, repeating their distress call. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Odyssey, man. Overboard, position 4 degrees south, 65 degrees east. Request immediate assistance." Static crackled in response, the cargo ship from their earlier call still too far to help. Lena's face was pale, her blonde hair plastered to her cheeks. She'd prepared the medical kit, blankets, bandages, a portable defibrillator, but the thought of using them felt like tempting fate. The storm was worsening. The barometer had plummeted to 29.5 inches, a sign Zara was intensifying, likely a Category 3 now. Waves reached 18 feet, their crests breaking into foam that stung like needles. The Odyssey's sails were double-reefed, the jib furled to reduce strain, but the boat still heeled dangerously with each gust. Sarah glanced at the anemometer. 50 knots sustained. They couldn't keep searching much longer. Without risking the entire crew, John turned to Sarah, his voice raw. "How long can he last out there?" Sarah didn't meet his eyes, her focus on the helm. "Water's warm, maybe 26 hours. Hypothermia's not the issue. It's exhaustion, injury, or—" She didn't finish. Sharks were a known danger in the Indian Ocean, their presence documented in these waters. Alex's life jacket had a strobe, but in this chaos, it was a faint beacon. "Keep searching," John said, his tone a plea. He moved to the rail, joining Miguel's vigil. The spotlight caught something, a glint of orange. John's heart leapt. "There, starboard side!" Miguel swung the beam, and there it was. Alex clinging to the horseshoe buoy, his face barely above the water. He was alive, but barely, his arms wrapped around the buoy, his body battered by the waves. The strobe light blinked weakly, its battery fading. "Sarah, bring us in!" John roared. Sarah nodded, adjusting the helm for a beam reach, the angle. That would let them approach without overshooting. The Odyssey surged forward, the wind pushing them hard. Sarah's hands were steady, but her mind raced. One wrong move and they'd lose him again, or worse, capsize. Miguel rigged the rescue sling, clipping it to a halyard and securing it to the winch. "Ready," he called, his voice cutting through the storm. John positioned himself at the sea, rail, the sling in hand, his body braced against the boat's violent motion. Lena stood behind him, ready to assist with the hoist. The Odyssey closed the distance, now 15 yards from Alex. The waves made it treacherous, each one lifting the boat and dropping it into a trough. Sarah timed her approach, waiting for a lull between swells. "Now, John!" she shouted. John leaned over the rail, the sling ready. Alex was close, his face pale, his eyes half closed. "Alex, grab the sling!" John yelled. Alex's head lifted, his gaze unfocused. He reached out, his fingers brushing the sling, but a wave slammed into him, pulling him under. "No!" John lunged forward, nearly losing his grip on the lifeline. Miguel grabbed his harness, yanking him back. The spotlight swept the water, and Alex resurfaced, coughing, still clutching the buoy. He was fighting, but his strength was fading. Sarah cursed under her breath, circling the boat for another pass. The wind was relentless, the Odyssey straining under the pressure. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before we have to run from this storm," she warned. "After that, we're all at risk." John nodded, his face set. One more try. He tightened his grip on the sling, his eyes locked on Alex. Sarah brought the boat around, her hands a blur on the wheel. The Odyssey sliced through a wave, spray drenching the deck. They were 10 yards away, then 5. Alex was within reach. "Alex, now!" John threw the sling, the line arcing over the water. Alex's hand shot out, weaker this time, but he caught it, wrapping the loop around his chest. John signaled Miguel, who cranked the winch, the halyard pulling taut. Lena grabbed the line, guiding it as Alex was lifted from the sea. The waves fought them, trying to rip Alex away, but the crew held firm. John reached over the rail, grabbing Alex's life jacket and hauling him aboard. Alex collapsed onto the deck, gasping, his body shivering despite the warm water. Lena was on him in an instant, wrapping him in a blanket, checking his pulse. "He's alive," she said, her voice trembling with relief. "Pulse is weak, but he's breathing." John sank to his knees, his hands shaking. "Thank God," he whispered. Sarah kept the helm, her eyes on the horizon, where the storm's core loomed darker. They'd found Alex, but they weren't safe yet. Lena worked quickly, assessing Alex for injuries. His left arm was bruised, possibly fractured, and he had a gash on his forehead, blood mixing with seawater. "He's in shock," she said. "We need to get him below, keep him warm." Miguel helped carry Alex to the cabin, where Lena set up an IV drip from the medical kit, her training as a medic steadying her hands. John followed, his face a mask of guilt. Alex's eyes fluttered open, meeting his. "You pushed me," he rasped, his voice barely audible. John's throat tightened. "I didn't mean, Alex, I'm sorry." The words felt hollow, inadequate. Alex turned his head away, too weak to respond. Sarah's voice cut through the moment. "John, we need to run. Zara's closing in. We can't stay here." John nodded, dragging himself back to the cockpit. The storm was a beast now. The wind, howling at 60 knots, waves crashing over the bow. Sarah plotted a course south, the direction John had insisted on days ago. The irony wasn't lost on him. Alex's northern route might have kept them clear of Zara's worst, but it was too late to know. The Odyssey turned, running before the wind, its sails trimmed tight. Sarah and John worked in silence, their movements automatic. Miguel secured the deck, lashing down anything loose. Lena stayed with Alex, monitoring his condition. The crew was battered, emotionally and physically, but they had no choice but to keep going. Hours passed, the storm's fury peaking, and then slowly easing. By dawn, the wind had dropped to 30 knots, the waves calming to a heavy swell. The Odyssey had survived, but the cost was etched in every face. Alex was stable, sleeping in the cabin, his injuries serious but not life-threatening. Lena's care had saved him, but his recovery would be long. In the cockpit, John sat with Sarah, the first light of day breaking through the clouds. "I was wrong," he said, his voice low. "I let my pride get in the way. If I'd listened to Alex," Sarah shook her head, "we all made mistakes. Alex pushed you, too. He was as stubborn as you were. This isn't just on you." John stared at the horizon. "I'm the captain. It's always on me." Miguel joined them, his face weary. "What now? We're 900 miles from Mauritius. Alex needs a hospital." "We sail on," Sarah said. "Full speed. We radio ahead. Get a medevac ready." She paused, her eyes on John. "And we talk. All of us. No more secrets, no more fights." John nodded, the weight of her words settling in. The Odyssey's journey wasn't over, but it had changed. The crew would have to rebuild not just their boat, but their trust. Alex's fall was a scar they'd all carry, a reminder of what happened when pride and anger overruled reason. Below, Alex stirred, his dreams haunted by the sea's embrace. He'd trusted his data, his logic, but the ocean had humbled him. John's shove had been the spark, but Alex knew his own defiance had lit the fuse. If they were to finish this voyage, they'd need each other, not just as sailors, but as a family. The Odyssey sailed on, its bow cutting through the waves, carrying a crew forever changed. The Indian Ocean stretched vast and unforgiving, but it had given them a second chance. Whether they'd earn it was up to them.